KFIZ News Time, 8:12. Welcome to this week's edition of Landscape Smart, brought to you by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. Lines are open, 923-1450, 1-888-900-1450 as usual. And if you choose to be bashful and you want to email your question in, KFIZ Studio at gmail.com. And also, as usual, we get to say good morning to the one, the only, and I'll go back to it, the inimitable Ron Rademann. Good morning, sir.
I never did look that one up in the dictionary yet to figure out what you're actually trying to
I'm
calling me here.
Well, I forgot to go to the thesaurus and find something different, so maybe next time. Anyhow, you got let me introduce Carol, Master Gardener.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
And
All set.
you're dressed for the hot weather.
Yes.
That's good.
It's inevitable.
So we got inevitable and inimitable. You're next with an in word.
Well, as if you've been listening in or watching on YouTube, the last few weeks we've had guests coming in on Rademann's show here in the morning, and so this week my eldest son Ryan, who generally lives in downtown Chicago and not traveling for business and pleasure, I guess, was in town, so I asked him to come on to the show, and then we'll be back next week, I think, with Paul Pucker from Country Touch. He's planning on next Saturday morning. So anyway, Ryan kind of helps us out with the behind-the-scenes production here on our YouTube channel, and along with Cody Mickler. They work together and collaborate how this all comes together. In case you're missing the show live and you want to or listen a second time and go back on YouTube and watch it.
Which is what most people do because it's really a gripping show.
Well, and sometimes the details are so you have to listen twice in order to figure out what we're trying to tell you. Well, anyway, Ryan, thanks for joining up with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's super exciting to be here. I've been obviously a long-time listener and first-time caller and participant on.
Sounds like the Art Bell show
on this side of the mic. But I kind of work in the industry as well in construction technology, and so it's cool to participate behind the scenes, but cool to be here doing this as well. I hope that today. I was kind of inspired by Luke last week when we got to talk to him a little bit about his organization and the history of how that got started, and thought it's been a little bit since there's been much conversation about the history of the Rademann Stone and Landscape Company and what that and the related organizations that kind of preceded it look like in Eden and Oakfield and Byron. And so if we've got time, it'd be cool if we could go back and talk a little bit about that today.
It sounds like a plan.
Well, we don't have any callers right now, so I guess we can go ahead and start up. I guess maybe it starts all the way back in the beginning, millions of years ago when this area was created by the glaciers and the sedimentary limestone deposits that are prevalent here and prevalent throughout the Great Lakes areas, but not really prevalent in very many other areas.
And we learned too, actually, that this area was all covered by water at one point in time in what they called a cerulean sea. So we still don't totally understand that, but that's part of what formed all the deposits before the glaciers even came, right? So that's what left the Niagara escarpment in its current form, or where that's exposed here at the surface where we can kind of get to it. So.
Well, had the water left, we'd be sitting here in scuba gear.
And part of how we learned about this was just the recent rebrand around Rademann Stone, which folks can check out online. But we were trying to kind of get into the history of the family and the history of the area, and we were actually kind of using one of these online AI LLMs to do that research, and it took us back further than we thought to ask about, and so that's where we learned some of this actually.
So this is like the Rademann ancestry,
right on.
Well,
without DNA.
Yeah, in my grandfather Richard, he actually was born here in America just after his grandfather came over on the ship from Germany. Well, it's actually part of Poland now, but it was Germany back in the early 1900s, and they settled in Lannon. And of course, Lannon has a lot of quarries and a lot of limestone, and they were farming in that area, and so he was, just picking up loose part-time kind of. He wasn't really. They didn't have companies back then. You just went into the quarry and you were. They gave you the stone to carve into pieces, basically, and then. They
had to use horses for some of that, right? To turn the saws and the machinery.
Yeah, well, they weren't really sawing or anything like that. They were cutting it with a sledgehammer and a chisel. They'd take a piece of stone and they'd carve it into a block, really. And that's how my grandfather started, with, and then he eventually moved up into the Eden area near Marblehead and started the Marblehead Stone Company, which then turned into the Rademann, rebranded into Rademann Stone, but it was actually originally called the Marblehead Stone Company.
And some of the early trading was almost just I think you said you even rode along sometimes. You'd load up some stone on a truck, drive down to Chicago, and basically just go door to door from company to company, selling it until it was gone, and then when it was gone, you'd come home.
And we did that a lot on Thursdays because paychecks came out on Friday. And so, Grandpa just, he didn't have too many choices. Sometimes you have to make some tough decisions, and the guys were working hard all week, and there wasn't enough in the till if they had such a thing back then. And we literally did. I rode along with them when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and we actually did that. It sounds kind of ridiculous today, but anybody that's been in a small business can understand it real well too. But
we were talking to Brian and Dan recently about the adjacent quarries there in Oakfield and Byron, right? So there was kind of a number of companies that were all kind of growing up together at the same time and splitting and merging, but they were all kind of after the same product and selling into the same markets.
Yeah, well, there was Panetti's Stone back in those days. On the Hamilton Hill, there's 4 corners of Hamilton Hill in County B, and it was Panetti Stone on one side, Rademann Stone on the other, and Fond du Lac Stone on the other. And those were the 3 companies that were basically competing in the Fond du Lac market. And this was before there wasn't really much going on out in Chilton with the Beekles or over in Oakfield was kind of just getting started a little bit too. And there was, out in Oakfield was the Dice Stone Company, Elmer Dice, and that was actually Jim and Dottie Keenan. Jim Keenan was a dentist here in town, and he married Dottie Keenan, and her father actually she was a Dice, and her father owned the Elmer Dice Stone Company, and then he was getting old, and he sold out the Elmer Dice Stone Company then to what was Oakfield Stone, which was my father, Keith, and brother Bruce, and then eventually my father went and helped my grandfather, so he moved back into Rademann Stone and split off the Oakfield Stone, which went on to with my uncle Bruce. And Oakfield Stone is still going strong here in Fond du Lac also.
So the term Fond du Lac Stone is something that, and Jerry, let us know kind of if we've got to cut this segment short, but the Fond du Lac Stone material is something that's naturally occurring, obviously, and is nationally really in high demand even today. 50 years ago, it was nationally recognized as something that had a really unique look to it and durable properties, and so it's just been highly sought after. And the same is true today. I mean, it's some of the most high-end material used in the most high-end applications.
Well, and that's a good point to move into. We'll run into the break, but when we come back, if we don't have any questions or callers, we'll talk on also the differences between the stone in Fond du Lac, stone in Oakfield, stone in
Key
Chilton.
questions. Are you open today?
So, oh yeah, if you want some stone, stop on out to Rademann's. We'll get you set up with flagstone or crushed stone or shredded dirt. Rademann Stone and Landscape, just 3 miles south of Fond du Lac, and then east on County B, a quarter mile.
KFIZ News Time 8:24. Welcome back. This is Landscape Smart, brought to you by Rademann Stone Landscape Company. The Ryans and the Rons are all here this morning, and so is Carol. We haven't heard much from her, but we got lines that are open. If you have any questions, I mean, it's a very interesting program, but you may have a lawn, garden, patio, block, stone question. Give a call, 923-1450, or send it to kfizstudio@gmail.com. We will get you and or your question, or both, on the air.
Sure. Yeah, we're talking about this, so you're welcome to call in and ask questions on anything Rademann Stone related or stone related, but also gardening or any other questions, because Carol is here for us also. So, but I was just gonna.
She's waving the flag.
One of the main differences in Fond du Lac stone is the stone in Fond du Lac is real smooth and flat, so it makes like great flagstone. As you get over towards Oakfield, the stone over in the Oakfield area is more pimply and bumpy. So, it doesn't work out as well for laying wall stone or laying or walking on it, things like that.
It can have aesthetic interest, though. I mean, that's what's different about all the stone across all different areas of the country. Is it just looks cool in different applications, right?
And then out in the Chilton area, which that stone has a little more of the purples and because there's more the like red clay and blue clay out there, you end up with more purples and more color. It's not as strong a stone in Chilton. It's a little shaky. You don't get the real nice big pieces, but you get the color. So each one has its attributes. So when you're cutting stone thin and laying it up for walls, you work out some real unique blends. And Rademann's actually has a lease on a quarry over in Ripon, and that's kind of a mix of limestone and sandstone.
So there's golds in that.
Yeah,
like a navy gray type color.
Yeah, it's kind of right where the two limestone and sandstones meet, so you get some really unique, interesting blends of color and texture there too. So anyway, those are just and that's why if you stop on out to Rademann's and visit their showroom, you'll see all the different blends of all these different colors mixed together. So
we kind of talked about the past, and obviously would love to spend a little bit of time talking about the present day and the future. I mean, when we think about the operation, there were periods of time where this organization specifically had big landscape contracting elements to the business. I mean, there were when you were pretty young, big like state and highway, projects, right? I mean, what's basically the interstate today was stuff that you guys.
Well, in the mid '70s or early '70s, we kind of branched into more landscaping, and it kind of revolved around stone, because when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I was looking, Grandpa Keith, my father, he wasn't sitting around doing nothing wasn't part of his. So he wasn't part of his program, and so he, wanted to put me to work. Well, the only way he could put me to work in the stone industry was landscaping with stone, because you can landscape when you're 14, 15, or 16, but you can't work in the quarry because of mining and safety issues until you're 18. So he figured out a way to put me to work, and that would be working with constructing stone retaining walls and flagstone patios and things like that.
And
so that's how we actually got into landscaping, was through stone.
You probably don't know exactly what year Mike joined, but Mike Milan's been a big part of the organization.
Yeah, well, Mike Milan, let's go back one step. Brian Abel, who formed Abel Landscaping, was working in the quarries for my father, and so he would be the one that I actually started out working with, because everybody that knows Brian knew he was a go-getter, and he wasn't going to go home at 4:30 and sit down. He wanted to work for a few more hours. So that's, I'd go after school and work with him on these landscape projects. And we'd do, work with stone because he understood the stone. And after a few years of that, Brian decided that my father was making too much money and that he wanted a piece of that pie. So he broke off and formed his own landscape company. Able Landscaping. He's retired and doing pretty well yet these days in retirement. But at that point in time, we had developed a pretty strong landscape following. And Mike Milan, who actually was working at Mercury Marine at the time and Moonlighting Landscaping on the side, my father committed to Mike Milan in 1975 to come and join Rademann Stone. So he quit working at Mercury Marine full-time and started working at Rademann Stone.
Do you know what year you planted your first tree or bought your first piece of property that you started planting trees on?
Well, that goes into a different segment here, but I kind of started doing a little bit of the same. And in 1981, I bought a piece of property and just started growing some trees on it, again, to supplement our landscape business.
So it was almost like the landscaping was a good way to use stone. Well, then all of a sudden you realize there's another kind of materials supply chain, not just with hardscapes, but with softscapes that need to come into the mix, and that's where Midpark was born.
Well, and it kind of developed the same way. I mean, I was laying flagstone patios, and people would go out and you'd finish up the flagstone patio, and they'd go sit on it, and they go, boy, it's kind of hot sitting out here. Can you guys plant a tree for me? I go, we'll
figure it out.
I'll get right back to you with that, And,
in about 10 years.
So that's how we kind of, and then,
So what year, do we know what year at? I don't mean to make you do math here, but Rick and Karen and Kathy graduated and when they joined.
Well, and that was all around the same time because Rick had actually graduated high school in 81,
yep,
which was the same year that I and Karen and Kathy graduated in 83. But 81 was the year I bought my first farm. And, of course, all of a sudden it starts getting a little crowded in there when you've got, my father, Keith, Mike Milan, Ron, and then pretty soon Rick is moving in, and we look right behind that, and there's Karen and Kathy. So that's when I kind of started to work my way. I never really planned on quitting Rademann Stone. I just always thought of growing trees as supplementing our family business.
Yep. So Rick was always really focused on the quarry and on the stone, and we can get into the whole national distribution of that stone that's kind of led to today with veneer stone and thin veneer.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Rick, Karen, and Kathy, relatives?
Yeah.
Oh,
Keith's,
Rick.
I mean, you got names, but
so Keith
I can't place them.
Keith and Bernice had 4 kids, and so Ron's the eldest.
And Rick, and then I have twin sisters, Karen and Kathy.
Okay, so these are your siblings.
So, and then let's go one step further. So anyway, Brock is Ryan's cousin because Brock is Rick's oldest son, and Ryan is my oldest son. So Rick and Ron, we've got there's your next generation. So now, so anyway, that's where Brock and Ryan come into the conversation, and then we'll talk about Travis and Tucker here yet too. But we better kind of swing into another break here, Jerry, and then as we come back, if anybody has any other questions, be sure to call in here anytime. Again, Rademann's open till noon today, Monday through Friday till 4:30. You can still get a delivery today if you give them a call out there. I don't know if Brock's answering or Joe or who's going to answer the phone here for you today, but 920-922-7612.
KFIZ News Time 8:35. Welcome back. This is Landscape Smart, brought to you by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. And just a reminder, the lines are open. This is a very fascinating historical perspective of the Rademann family and the Rademann businesses. But the lines are open for your calls for your landscape needs, gardening needs. Carol's here chomping at the bit to answer your question about hydrangeas or tulips or whatever. 923-1450, online, KFIZ Studio at gmail.com.
Yeah, just a reminder, too, that, you can, if you missed the beginning, you can go back on KFIZ and watch it on demand, or otherwise tune into our YouTube and search for Landscape Smart 25, and you'll come up with this episode where you can go back and hear it how it ends, and then go back and listen to how it began again. So,
yeah, we'll try to, with the minutes that we've got left, talk a little bit about the things that transpired between the early 80s and today and looking forward, and we'll even try and talk, if we've got a minute, about the future in terms of the rebrand that was done and the content that we're capturing and the national audience that we're trying to build the organization's capabilities to serve, and then make sure that the content is something that can serve and reach them.
This may be a stupid question before you get into your topic. Is there enough stone out there for all this?
That's a good question. I mean, if you look specifically,
you work a quarry and all of a sudden you got a big hole in the ground and people go swimming.
Right.
Is there?
Right. Ron can speak to this, but I mean, one thing that as I asked that question, I remember Grandpa Keith speaking to that.
But before we get to that topic, let's take a caller.
Okay.
Good morning. You're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Morning. I was wondering, I have a maple tree in my front yard, and there's so many dead branches. And I was just curious, just a price range of if you got a mature tree and had it planted. I was just curious about what, just a price range for cost, because I have a swing on it and things, and I just didn't want to have to start over with a little tree.
Well,
get a smaller swing, Lori.
Well,
like me?
Yeah, it's going to be quite a few years before you could probably put a swing back in a tree that you would buy, because even if you'd buy the largest possible tree that could be transplanted, and we can actually transplant trees that are 25 or 30 years old that have some have an awful good start, but they aren't going to have a branch that would be even close to supporting a swing for at least probably another 25 years. So,
oh, really?
Yeah,
oh.
Because it's, it just, you have to have in a tree that you would move in with a tree spade like that, you might spend $2,500 to $3,500 on the tree alone, and then you'd still be waiting, like I said, maybe another 20 years before it would be big enough where it would actually have a branch that would be strong enough to support, 100 or 200 pounds.
So just move to a place with mature trees.
Yeah, you're going to have to sell your house and find a different home with a bigger tree in it, I guess. Because,
right, yeah, maybe that'd be cheaper.
But, you get a pretty nice tree for, $700, $800, $900. You don't get a lot of a tree today for $200 like you used to.
Oh, right, definitely, yeah.
But, so if you want a nice tree in your yard, I tell people, you should maybe budget close to $1,000, $700 to $1,000, and that'll get you a pretty nice tree. But a tree like that, would be another 25 years before you'd be putting a swing in it. So,
okay, and also, do you mulch trees that are already mature, or is that just for new trees?
Well, no, you should still mulch mature trees. Just if there was old spent mulch on there, clean that off first, and then put a light layer, just an inch or two of mulch back around it. In a lot of maples, you can't get grass to grow around them anyway. There's too much competition from roots, and instead of putting dirt over the top of the roots, which your tree hates, and that's why it doesn't like it and does poorly because of that, go ahead and clean that dirt off and put just a thin 1-inch layer of bark mulch, and extend it out 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 feet so that you don't have to worry about it not having grass on top of the roots. So.
Okay, that sounds good. I used to play ball with your sisters, and
Oh.
boy, were they athletes.
They still are athletes. You should see them on the
Yeah.
pickleball courts today.
Oh, I would be afraid to play against them. Yeah, I was on their baseball team, and we just sat in the outfield, and they took over. We just watched them get everything.
Right on.
Well, and you know, and that's part of the, you know, they were out, again, you know, we talked about starting out young. Well, you know, once they were capable, or even before they were capable, they were tasked with carrying rolls of sod, and that starts when you're about age 13 or 14 in our family.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, they, by the time they got to be, you know, 15 and 16, they were pretty, they didn't have a weight program in the high schools like they do, or middle schools like they do today. But
You had a family program.
But we were on a family weight program.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
nice family. Very
so
nice family
thanks
you
for
have.
the call,
So,
Lori. Yeah, that's,
You're welcome.
All right, take care.
Have a
Good
good
luck
day.
with your tree problem. And the lines are open. We had another caller that hung up, so you want to give a call back, give a call back. 923-1450, 1-888-900-1450. This could be another caller. Nope, that's the previous one still hanging up. 923-1450, lines open. Give us a shout.
So, yeah, well, I guess we were kind of talking, you know, Karen and Kathy and my brother Rick, even though they didn't graduate, they were still working on my crew already back then, and along with a lot of, you know, friends of ours and theirs. When we were doing like some of these sod projects and things like that, they'd work part-time, and so that's how, you know, we all got into the business young. You know, I was 16 and already a foreman on these jobs. So, you know, it just kind of kept on going on from there with Karen and Kathy and Rick. And then so by the time they graduated from high school, they were moving on into other areas. Rick more into the stone part of it, Kathy into the office part of it, and Karen stayed and helped me in the landscape part of it.
Righty.
So let's grab our call, Jerry.
All righty. You're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hi, good morning. Yes. My question is about viburnums.
Okay.
I have 3 different species in my yard, and I'm sorry I don't know the exact kind, but one of them has been eaten by whatever, and the leaves are probably 3/4 gone, dead, brown, eaten. The other 2 are not as bad, but definitely have some holes in the leaves.
Are these, there are 3 different viburnums. Are they 3 different varieties of viburnum
Yes,
also?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's more of a common problem, and it may be just, you know, I would use the insecticide 8, the numeral 8,
Okay.
it's EIGHT, not 8 as in eaten, but 8. And we have that available out at Rademann's, and it's kind of a kills all type of it works for most everything. So I would,
Okay.
so that's why I would start out with that insecticide. And you're going to want to spray it, you know. It's actually, I would not spray it here at least until Tuesday. You shouldn't do any spraying of any kind here today, tomorrow, or Monday. It's just too hot. So don't.
Okay.
So whether you're spraying an insecticide, an herbicide, anything, it volatiles with this heat and humidity. So don't. It's better to have the insects have a long weekend here too, and you know, you can stop on out to Rademann's today and pick it up, or Monday, all open all day long. But I would not apply it until at least till Tuesday, and then you're going to want to put a second application down somewheres around between a week and 10 days later, because if there's something eating there now, they're also laying eggs, and those will be hatching usually on a 7 to 10 day interval. So if you'd spray on Tuesday, you'd want to spray again the following Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or something like that. And the weather after this weekend, the 10-day, 14-day outlook calls for more normal June weather, actually maybe even a little cooler than normal late June weather. It's mostly in the 70s or real low 80s for the next 2 weeks. So you'll have ample time to get that second application on.
Okay, so 2 applications is enough? I mean,
probably, yep.
Okay.
Then I would just, I'm sure that, because by then we're into July, and you get less insect activity. You know, they've kind of done their damage. They've retooled for next year already, so to speak. And so if it's something, if you'd see more, it might even be a whole different problem that would develop if it would be a third, but 2 applications should be sufficient.
Okay. So the one bush that is, 3/4 gone with leaves, should I just leave it, or do I cut out that wood? Or...
Anything, yeah. Well, look to see if there's buds. A lot of times there's buds behind those leaves that the insects have eaten. Now, if the branch would be dead or brown and no bud activity then go ahead and remove that branch. But more than likely, a lot of times when these insects defoliate plants this early into the season, and we call early June, early in the season, they'll have a chance to recover and grow new leaves yet. So I wouldn't remove any branches until they're, now if you bend them and they'd break, then they're dry and could be removed. But for the most part, I would just leave those branches for now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another quick question. I've noticed that I have like a white mildewy substance on a 9-bark. Does that sound like you've seen that?
Yeah, that's very common. Do you want to take this one?
I don't really know that much about it.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'll go on. Yeah, that's aphids more than likely, and that is there. You actually would use the same insecticide 8 on it. It has the appearance of a fungus, but it's actually tiny insects that are kind of growing in a little nest together. And 9-bark, especially some of the older varieties of ornamental 9-bark, are very susceptible to that. So you're not alone there. The newer varieties, they've come up with some newer varieties that are more resistant to those aphids, but that doesn't mean you should tear your old one out and start over. It just means if you go buy a new one, make sure you buy one of the newer varieties that is more resistant than the older varieties that aren't. So, and I would use that same insecticide 8, and you could spray that at the same time and the same intervals.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Right. Thanks for the call. And now you got a project for when it cools down a little bit.
Yep, you can go back into the air conditioning for 3 more days. So I kind of lost our train of thought here, right? You have to retool me again here now.
One thing that was brought up was the rocks.
And more calls can come in, too. We're not exclusive here today.
There was a campaign called Rocks for a Reason in 2016 that Courtney kind of brought to life. And so I think that's one other thing that'd be kind of cool to talk about in terms of other members of the next generation. And so I just had to quick Google. We'll put a link in the YouTube show notes to remember some of the exact details of how that came about. But in 2016, Nordstrom, for some reason, started selling, these luxury brands sell different items at ridiculous prices. And so they put a rock on their annual gift guide for Christmas, just one small piece of stone, and it was $85. And Dr. Margolis...
The cost on it would be about less than a penny, by the way.
Right. And so Dr. Margolis, who was a heart doctor at Children's Hospital, Wisconsin, which is where Courtney Rademann works, that's Ron's youngest daughter, that's my sister, he started collecting these rocks from the shores of Lake Michigan saying, hey, what if you donate $20 to Children's Hospital, and we'll give you the rock, or $85, donate whatever you want to Children's Hospital, and I'll send you a rock with a personal thank you note. Well, what was funny was he collected a bag of 100 of these and thought, oh, we'll raise a couple $1,000s doing this. Well, then they launched a press conference, and the environmentalists went nuts and said, hold on a second, you can't just be collecting rocks from the shores of Lake Michigan and selling them. Like, that's not allowed. And so Courtney swung into action and is like, we've got some stone. So Brock loaded up an entire pickup truck full and took it down there. And again, now the news is there with this load of Rademann stone coming to to the rescue to kind of appease the environmentalists. So what ended up happening was they sold something like 2,000 of these, and they had raised $50,000. And there was this was a national news story about what was being done in light of Nordstrom. Well, Nordstrom picks up on this and goes, you know what, we agree. And they donated $50,000 to the cause. Wow. And I just saw this thing ended up raising $118,000 in 2017 for Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, thanks to kind of the collab between Courtney and Brock there. So that was in 13 days that whole thing unfolded start to finish.
Just before Christmas, yeah. Yeah, it was, it's, as we get into, Brock's cousins, the whole family, how they all embrace the Rademann family, they just jump right in and find different reasons, different causes with children, Courtney working through the Children's Hospital so anyway, we got an emailer coming in.
We do. We got a question from Dan. He's sending, I'll show it to you in a minute, a picture of his rose bush. He's wondering what's going on with the leaves on the plant. I don't know if I can make that larger for you or not.
That looks like mites, doesn't it, Carol?
I think so too. Yes, because then those are like individual black leaves that are just being sucked out, right? Is that what you see? Yeah, I would say that's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, it appears as it's kind of skeletonizing the leaf, and so what that is either mites or it's sucking the nutrients out of the leaf, the chlorophyll. And so again, they're more like a 3-in-1 would be best always on roses, because there you've got a miticide, an insecticide, and a fungicide. And usually we'll probably start seeing more fungus problems showing up on roses here. So, I would definitely, go to more of a 3-in-1 on it. And we have some different 3-in-1 products out at Rademann's that would work for that. So, if you happen to have one on the shelf in your garage, that would work just as well also. So, but use more of it has to be more of a 3-in-1. So, better get into our break here, Jerry, because we're running out of time here. We only have a couple more minutes left. So, anyway, I guess Rademann's open today until noon, Monday through Friday till 4:30. You can stop on out. We're just 3 miles south of Fond du Lac, east on County B, about a quarter mile, or give us a call, 920-922-7612.
And we are back. Final few minutes of this week's edition of Landscape Smart, brought to you by Rademann Stone and Landscape Company. If you have a last-minute question, 923-1450. Real quickly, an email at kfizstudio@gmail.com. Back to Ryan and Ron and Carol.
Maybe just we'll kind of just touch on the fourth generation here a little bit. Brock and Brock's family and cousins. Brock's sister married Nate Siedschlag, and he works and loads your truck when you stop out to Rademann's, and for shredded dirt or bark mulch, Nate is the one that loads your truck. So Rick's son and son-in-laws are involved in the business. My sister Karen retired from landscaping when we stopped actually doing landscape installations. Kathy has 3 children. Kathy and Mark have 3 children. Tucker graduated with a master's degree actually in business, so doesn't work day to day. We don't really need someone with a master's degree at Rademann's, but he also helps Brock with long-term planning and us all, with long-term planning. And then, of course, I have 2 sons, 2 daughters, and Ryan and Travis are both in graduates in business and finance. So they also assist behind the scenes with Brock. Brock takes care of day-to-day, but he has a strong supporting cast there with Tucker and Ryan and Travis. So all 4 of the Rademann Keith's grandchildren all had graduated with degrees in finance and business, and so it's interesting that way how that all came together.
And then today you've got Brock and Reed kind of really focused on this national distribution too. So there's a dealer network of architects and distributors, big presence on the West Coast and on the East Coast, but heavier out west. It used to just be Chicago and Minneapolis as some big markets, and that's completely gone nationwide.
Well, and I asked Reed last year at the end of the year, I says, what was actually, and he said, Utah actually is our largest, buys more stone than any other state from Rademann Stone.
As of 2024.
Wow.
In 2024. So you wouldn't naturally pick Utah as being our top.
Not that many
market.
people,
Well, that's just it.
other than Salt Lake City.
So anyway, I guess they're playing our song here, Jerry.
Yep, the band struck it up.
So all of you that will be we'll be here next Saturday. You can call in with all the questions that we didn't answer today on Rademann Stone, or you can call in with more of a landscape and gardening question next Saturday again at 8 o'clock. I was just going to thank you, Carol, for the long answers you gave us here today. Rademann's is open till noon today, and we'll be back next Saturday. Watch us on YouTube if you missed the beginning of this show. Paul Pucker will be on with us next Saturday morning.
Perfect. Thank you all, and thank you all for your calls today.